The life of a concubine in ancient Japan was a complex and often difficult one, shaped by a combination of social and cultural norms, economic realities, and personal relationships. Concubines, or mistresses, as they were sometimes called, were women who entered into a sexual relationship with a man outside of marriage, typically with the understanding that they would not enjoy the same status or rights as a legal wife. In many cases, these women were drawn from the ranks of the lower classes or were sold into concubinage by their families as a means of securing their financial future. The role of the concubine varied depending on the individual circumstances of her arrangement, but in general, she was expected to provide sexual companionship to her patron, bear his children, and perform various domestic duties. In some cases, concubines were able to rise in social status through their relationships with powerful men, but more often than not, they remained on the margins of society, subject to the whims of their patrons and with little legal protection. Despite the challenges they faced, concubines played an important role in the social and cultural life of ancient Japan. They were often educated and well-versed in the arts, and their patronage of poets, artists, and musicians helped to shape the country's cultural landscape. At the same time, their presence in the household could create tension and conflict with legal wives and other members of the household, leading to complex power struggles and shifting alliances. Overall, the life of a concubine in ancient Japan was a complex and nuanced one, shaped by a variety of factors both internal and external to the individual. Understanding this role is key to gaining a deeper appreciation of the culture and society of ancient Japan, and the ways in which gender and power were negotiated in this fascinating and complex historical period. Introduction to concubinage in ancient Japan. Concubinage was a common practice in ancient Japan, and involved a man taking a woman as a sexual companion outside of marriage, typically with the understanding that she would not enjoy the same status or rights as a legal wife. This arrangement was often driven by economic necessity, as families sold their daughters into concubinage in order to secure their financial future. Concubines played an important role in the social and cultural life of Japan, providing sexual companionship, bearing children, and often contributing to the household economy through domestic work or artistic patronage. However, their status was often precarious, subject to the whims of their patrons and with little legal protection. Understanding the role of concubinage is key to gaining a deeper appreciation of the complex power dynamics at play in ancient Japanese society, and the ways in which gender and sexuality were negotiated within this cultural context. The role and status of concubines in Japanese society. The role and status of concubines in Japanese society varied depending on a number of factors, including the individual circumstances of their arrangement and the attitudes of their patrons and society at large. In general, however, concubines were considered to occupy a lower status than legal wives and were subject to various restrictions and limitations. One of the key functions of a concubine was to provide sexual companionship to her patron. This was often a source of shame and stigma, as sexual relationships outside of marriage were generally frowned upon in Japanese society. However, in many cases, concubines were highly educated and well-versed in the arts, and their patronage of poets, artists, and musicians helped to shape the cultural landscape of the time. Concubines were also expected to bear children, as the ability to produce heirs was a crucial factor in the maintenance of a household's social and economic status. In some cases, a concubine's children were recognized and given the same status as the legitimate children of the household, while in other cases, they were excluded from inheritance and faced significant social stigma. Overall, the role and status of concubines in Japanese society was complex and often fraught with tension and inequality. While they were able to contribute in various ways to the cultural and economic life of the time, they were also subject to significant limitations and discrimination, highlighting the ways in which gender and power were negotiated in this historical period. Daily life and challenges faced by Japanese concubines. The daily life of a Japanese concubine was shaped by a number of factors, including the individual circumstances of her arrangement, the attitudes of her patron, and the broader social and cultural norms of the time. Despite their contributions to the household economy and cultural life of Japan, concubines faced a number of challenges and limitations in their daily lives. One of the primary challenges faced by concubines was the lack of legal protections and social recognition. As they were not considered legal wives, they had no claim to the property or status of their patrons and were often subject to abuse and mistreatment. This lack of legal standing also meant that they were excluded from formal ceremonies and rituals and could not participate in many aspects of social and cultural life. Concubines also faced significant social stigma, as sexual relationships outside of marriage were frowned upon in Japanese society. This stigma could be particularly pronounced for concubines, who were often drawn from the lower classes or sold into concubinage by their families as a means of securing their financial future. The relationship between Japanese concubines and their masters. The relationship between Japanese concubines and their masters was complex and multifaceted, shaped by a variety of factors including economic necessity, social status, and personal affection. While the specifics of each relationship varied, there were certain patterns and dynamics that were common to many concubine-master relationships in Japan. One of the key factors in the relationship between concubines and their masters was economic necessity. This economic dynamic could create tension and conflict in the relationship, particularly if the patron felt that the concubine was not contributing enough to the household economy or was not fulfilling her duties. Despite this economic dynamic, many concubine-master relationships were marked by a degree of affection and intimacy. While the relationship was not considered a legal marriage, many patrons developed deep emotional connections with their concubines and treated them with respect and kindness. In some cases, these relationships extended beyond the realm of sex and companionship and involved shared intellectual and artistic pursuits. The legacy of concubinage in Japanese history and culture. The legacy of concubinage in Japanese history and culture is a complex one, reflecting both the contributions of concubines to the cultural and economic life of Japan, as well as the inequalities and limitations they faced within society. One of the most significant legacies of concubinage is its impact on Japanese art and literature. Many concubines were highly educated and well-versed in the arts, and their patronage of poets, artists, and musicians helped to shape the cultural landscape of the time. Their experiences and perspectives also influenced the themes and motifs of many works of art and literature, providing a unique glimpse into the lives of women in Japan during this period. Concubinage also played an important role in the household economy of Japan, with many concubines contributing to domestic work and artistic production. This economic contribution helped to shape the social and economic structures of the time, and in some cases enabled women to rise in social status through their relationships with powerful men. Despite these challenges, the legacy of concubinage in Japanese history and culture continues to shape our understanding of gender, power, and sexuality in this historical period. By examining the lives and experiences of concubines, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of social and cultural life in Japan, and the ways in which these forces shaped the lives of women and men alike. So that's it for today. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to get all the latest updates.